Sarah's fingers find the phone before her eyes fully open. The bedroom is still dark except for the blue glow that pulls her from sleep like a fishing line. Her thumb moves across the screen. Email, text, news alert. Each swipe a small surrender to someone else's morning. It wasn't always this way. There was a time when the first hour belonged to no one but the person living it. When morning was a threshold you crossed deliberately, not a continuation of yesterday's conversations. The Romans had a word for this first hour, the time before the world made its claims. They wrote about it carefully, as if they knew something we've forgotten. In Zen monasteries, the morning bell still rings in the dark. The monks rise not to messages, but to silence. They sit with the day before the day sits with them. But most of us wake to a different bell now, the notification sound that trained us to reach first for other people's urgencies, other people's thoughts. We gave away the threshold without noticing we had something to lose. What did the first hour of the day mean before it meant getting back to people? We tell ourselves we want the quiet. We book retreats, buy meditation apps, speak longingly of simpler times. And yet, when we find ourselves alone with the morning, the first instinct is to fill it. The silence feels wrong now, not peaceful, wrong, as if something important might be happening elsewhere while we sit with nothing but our own thoughts. The inbox promises connection, purpose, the feeling that we matter to someone's day. The quiet promises only itself. There was a school of thought in Rome that treated the morning like a kind of preparation, not for the day's tasks, but for the day's character. They believed the first hour set something in motion, not productivity, but a way of being that would carry through whatever came next. In the monasteries of old Japan, they called this first sitting morning mind, the quality of attention before attention gets divided, before the self splits into the one who wants and the one who responds to wanting. But we've built a world that makes such preparation feel selfish. Every minute not spent responding feels like a minute stolen from someone who needs us. The morning ritual begins to look like an indulgence we can't afford, so we reach for the phone instead. Not because we don't want the quiet, but because the quiet has become too expensive to buy. Seneca wrote his 83rd letter to Lucilius from his villa outside Rome, sometime in the final years of his life. The letter opens with a description so precise you can almost smell the cold air. He has just taken his morning bath, not the heated pools of the wealthy, but cold water deliberately chosen. A brief exercise follows, then a period of what he calls retreat into himself. This is a man who spent his days managing the correspondence of an empire, advising a young emperor whose moods could determine the fate of nations. His afternoons belonged to Nero, his evenings to the endless social obligations of Roman political life. But these first hours, these belonged to Seneca alone. He writes to Lucilius about the quality of this time, how it differs from the rest of his day. Not because the tasks are easier, but because the mind that approaches them has been, in his words, set right. The cold bath, the brief exercise, the silence. These are not preparations for productivity. They are preparations for remaining himself while the world tries to make him into something else. And yet, even as he writes this, Seneca knows the contradiction. The letter itself is work, part of his correspondence with a friend, part of his duty as a teacher of philosophy. Even his description of solitude becomes a kind of performance shared with someone else. The morning ritual was already under pressure, even then. The world had always wanted to claim the first hour. Seneca simply found a way to claim it back for a little while, before surrendering to the day's demands. What Seneca understood, writing by lamplight while the rest of Rome still slept, was not that the morning ritual would solve the problem of being claimed by others. It was that the ritual itself was a form of practice, not for productivity, but for the much harder work of remembering who you are when no one is asking you to be anyone in particular. The cold bath, the brief exercise, the silence. These were not escapes from the world's demands. They were rehearsals for meeting those demands without disappearing into them. A way of establishing each morning that there was still someone home before the day began making its appointments with that someone. This is what the monastery bells were calling the monks toward, and what we reach past when we reach first for the phone. Not the elimination of obligation, but the brief daily practice of existing before the obligations begin their work of reshaping us. The first hour was never about having no one to answer to. It was about remembering that there was someone doing the answering. He puts it in one of the letters, more or less this way: "The day will make you into what it needs you to be." The morning is your chance to remember what you were before it started trying. Maybe what we lost when the first hour became the inbox was not the quiet itself, but the daily practice of being someone before being needed by someone else. The phone is still there on the nightstand. The inbox still fills while we sleep. The world still makes its claims the moment we let it. These are not problems to be solved, but conditions to be met. The way morning itself is not a problem, but a daily return to the question of how to begin. But somewhere, in apartments and houses scattered across the city, a few people still sit with the first hour before giving it away. Not because they've solved the problem of being needed, but because they've remembered there was someone there to be needed. They know the day will reshape them. It always does. But they take these few minutes to remember the shape they started with. The morning bell rings, whether we hear it or not. The first hour arrives, whether we claim it or surrender it. The question is not whether the world will ask us to be someone else today. It will. The question is whether we remember, for just a moment, who was there before it started asking.